everybody. And we're gonna give it just a couple of minutes just so everybody can have the chance to log on. And then yeah, we'll go ahead and get started after that. Julie can't see all the participants, so I'll start saying hi to everybody. We've got the Shea family on.
Oh, great.
Let's see, Dr. Labonde is here. Kathy's on, Shauna.
Hi, Dr. L. Hi, Shauna. Hi, Kathy.
Yeah, lots of names on here we recognize. Well, we're so happy everyone was able to join us today. And then, of course, if anyone has to hop off at any point or anything like that, this is recorded. And so we'll have the recording on our website and on our YouTube channel. But hopefully everyone will be able to stay for the full time. And then we'll give it just a couple more minutes. I might have us start a little bit after 12, just so everyone has a chance to log on. Right. All right. Well, it is 12. What do you think? Should we get started here?
Sure.
All righty. Well, I am going to share my screen here for everyone. Okay. All righty. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. We're all so excited that you're here for a really special Meet the Founder conversation today. Of course, sitting down with Julie, our CEO, president, and founder, and someone whose vision and heart has helped shape everything that the Gabriel Foundation is today. So whether you're a longtime supporter, new friend, someone that's curious about parrots, we're all just so excited to share more about our history and story with you. And one thing, it is our 30th anniversary. Technically our anniversary was yesterday, correct, Julie?
Correct.
Fun. So we're 30 and 1 day old. But yeah, we thought this would just be a really fun look into the last 3 decades. We're going to be spending about 45 minutes talking with Julie, hearing some great stories, learning about the mission and work of TGF. And then at the end, we're going to have it open for questions. And so while we're going along, if any questions come up, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. And then maybe some of them will be answered by the time we go through, but we'll be taking some time at the end to answer some of those as well. Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and just jump right into it. Julie, I would love to start with your personal journey. And maybe you can take us back to the moment or experience that really sparked your interest in parrots.
Yes, thanks, Carol. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see familiar names. It in addition to being a test of one's memory, it really is heartwarming to see people that parents have introduced me through or to over the past 30 years. Is really, really exciting. I was not born with a bluebird on my shoulder. As you can see when I'm there as a year-old kid. But animals and nature were always so important to me. I grew up, um, I grew up in Chicago, the Chicago area, and came from a large family, very closely related. And we, as kids, there were a bunch of us and we all hung out together. We were busy inside and outside, especially every time we could be, when weather and our parents allowed. And growing up in the Midwest, and I think growing up that many years ago was very special. I feel very fortunate to have come through my life with that history, because there was so much opportunity to learn and to share and to be a part and to initiate growth. The picture of some of my family is to the right there. And if you can see me, I'm the one in the middle row between my grandmother and my great grandmother.
Are
And
you the one that's on the cushion, Julie?
no, I am the one standing in the
Oh, wait,
middle.
right
Mhm.
here. Okay.
That's me, yes. Yeah. And the rest of my siblings are in that photo as well. And I think back to those times, and for those of us that I think have gotten to a certain point in our lives, our these memories and these photos are like transparencies and layers of one upon the other, and they take me back to times and thoughts and to feelings and many, many experiences that I had back there. I was very, very fortunate as a young kid to have some great teachers. And I think I've been able to get the wealth of knowledge and excitement and growth and curiosity from teachers my whole life. But when I was in third grade, I had a very special teacher, and she loved birds. She probably loved parrots, but she never talked about them. Then we didn't. But in the Midwest, we would have the most beautiful red birds come to us in winter, and that would be the cardinal. And I remember seeing those gorgeous red birds, and we would go on these nature walks when kids would still go on walks outside and around the school. And Miss Archibald would always point out, oh, there's a jay, there's a cardinal, there's a robin, there's a whatever. So I got used to hearing them and looking for them. And then that summer, after my third grade year, I was outside with my mom. She was gardening. I was probably playing in the mud or doing something like that. And this little beautiful bird, unlike I'd ever seen before, it was blue and it was such a beautiful, beautiful color. It landed absolutely on my shoulder. And when that happened, I was astonished, but I also felt so special that I was chosen by this bird to be the person it landed on. And I was ecstatic. And of course, I called out to my mom, and she came on over, and with her help, she was able to catch it up. And we happened to have some kind of enclosure that she put it in. And then the next day, we went out to the Ben Franklin store. Some of you may remember those. They're kind of along the lines of Woolworths. And we've got a cage for the bird. We've got gravel paper for the bottom of the cage. We've got sandpaper covers for the perches. And we've got that parakeet food, i.e. bird seed. What we didn't know all those years ago is just amazing. That any of those budgies lived any length of time at all is beyond me. But from that moment on, parrots were a part of my life. And I think from that joy, from the color, from the experience, from the interaction, and watching them looking at me and me looking back at them, it just triggered something that nothing else ever has in my life. And it's this amazing feeling that there's a miracle right there sitting with me, and that if I could only understand this little bird, what would it be telling me? So I feel like that budgie chose me. And that became a part of my early story.
And I know that you had parrots in other aspects of your life as well. Would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was young, my grandparents divided their time between Chicago and Miami Beach, Florida. And in doing so, that was because my grandfather, who gave our entire family the kind of values that our family has had, he taught us to never be afraid, that if you want something, you need to go out and you need to earn it. And that there are no limitations, and you can do and have and be what you want to be. It may not be always what you think it's going to be, but you can do it. And I really have respect for my grandfather, because he ran away from home in New York City. His father immigrated from Russia in the late 1800s. And my grandfather's mother passed away. His father remarried, the typical story of the mean stepmother. And at 13 years old, my grandfather, Ben Jaffe, left home and went out on his own. And everything that he created really became sort of a core value for all of his offspring and his kin, is that if you want something, what you have to do to work in order to get it. And as a kid, we would fly down in the night flight from Chicago down to Miami, and we would stay at his first hotel, which was the Castaways in Miami. It's gone, it's been long gone there. But at that time, we loved being outside. We loved being in the pool. We loved going up to the ocean. But one of the things that was fantastic is that there were birds all around the grounds there. So from seeing the flamingos, seeing the different parrots, the minor birds, the toucans, all the things that were on that ground, as a kid, between 8 and 10 years old, it was spectacular. And we got to see and share and love those things. I think that it gave my siblings and I a wonderful opportunity to really feel connected with nature. And for me, it was again with birds. After the Castaways, my grandfather was a part owner of another hotel in Miami, and that is the Fontainebleau. And the Fontainebleau, he was part of the original group of owners, and that hotel opened in 1954. So at that time, it was beautiful. There was a pool. He copied it after some of the Cuban resorts that he had seen with traveling with my grandmother. And we would go down there and we just loved it, because you'd walk in the lobby and what do you know, paradise for me, there'd be more parrots sitting inside. That Fontainebleau was sold. My grandfather sold his interest in that hotel in 1957, because along with several other developers from Chicago and elsewhere, he decided to move to Las Vegas. The interesting part about the Fontainebleau and my grandfather's history in Las Vegas is that when the new Fontainebleau in Las Vegas opened, it was an honor to my grandfather, and he has been acknowledged because of his foresight and his concept for bringing the Fontainebleau to fruition. But he came up before that Las Vegas hotel, because he didn't live to see the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. He came up with the design and the concept for another hotel that was called the Tropicana. And he left Miami and came to Las Vegas, where he put a consortium together and they built the Tropicana Hotel. And you can see from this archive photo that there was nothing else around there. There was virtually non-existent, but it was lush, it was verdant, and it was beautiful. And it was one of the first hotels to be off the Las Vegas Strip. And that hotel flourished for many, many years, close to 70 years, until 2024, when that hotel went up in a cataclysm of demolition, fireworks, display, a laser show like I've never seen before. And that Grand Dame was leveled to the ground. And we, as a family, were really happy about that, because that hotel, which we affectionately called a she, didn't have to lose any of her history of glamour. It was a part of it, and she didn't have to become this decrepit old lady, run down, living in terrible condition as a hotel. And it was wonderful for our family, and there are 52 of us now that are all related, that were there for the farewell and for the demolition of this hotel. It was pretty spectacular.
The
Then,
photo that we have is a little bit blurry. It's a little pixelated, but the photo that is on the right of this screen is from the demolition, and you can see like the lasers and fireworks. We'll have to find a better photo of that at some point.
yeah, it was spectacular. And it was just amazing to see, because it was a light show like no other. But the Tropicana played an important part in my life and my siblings' life and my family's life. We would have family meetings out there. We would go out there, we would hang out, we would do fun things, we'd see the entertainment. And in those days, it really was a gambling city, which it still is, but it's so much more of a resort area now and a destination than it was back then. And in our early history, in 1999, the Gabriel Foundation came up with the idea of symposiums dedicated to many, many different branches of interest related to parrots. So from aviculture to conservation, to breeding, to retail, to welfare, to sanctuary, to rescue, to rehabilitation, to behavior, all of those things. And we started our very first parrot symposium in 1999, and we held it at the Tropicana Hotel. At that time, we were not operating the hotel. Our family was just the landlord and had the land, but people that were there and that had the lease to be the operators of it had a number of parrots and bird shows that were a part either with the talent that was there in the different shows, or they were set up for display. All of which now I think was just really terrible. But 30 plus years ago, I did not have that kind of awareness. Moving on, after I came out to Colorado, went to school in Boulder, and my family all of us kids really liked being out west, and I'm the eldest of four. And we ultimately, my mom and all of us kids, ended up being a part of loving life in Colorado. And Colorado was important. And growing up, because Colorado was important, I like to think it was because of all the time we spent in Wyoming and Montana and moving around. We were never just confined to a city. So we got that exploration bug as kids. And in college, I did what so many did back then. I had a great time and a wild time, and I ended up meeting Ahmed, who was the person who ultimately would become my one and last or only husband. Needless to say, it didn't work out. But Ahmed was from Kuwait, and he was studying in the United States on a diplomatic visa, studying. Kuwaitis then could study anything that they wanted, and he chose to go into electrical engineering. And we met, and a number of years later, I moved to Kuwait. We had gotten married first in the United States, and then we got married in Kuwait. And I set up life in Kuwait. And my very first wedding gift in Kuwait was a yellow-naped Amazon. And it was given to me by my Kuwaiti in-laws. And the story of that bird is that I recall was how far from birds in the wild that bird had to travel to end up in the souk or in the market in Kuwait and go into the care of this really uneducated about anything bird girl like me. And the memory of what I didn't know stays with me still, but that also that it was a very different time, and finding information about how to care for a bird, what's involved, what to feed it, all these other things. Who knew? And the only kinds of resource materials I could find were maybe from the different expatriates that lived there in those years, and people that maybe had acquired other parrots from the market in Kuwait. And Siddiqui lived with me from 1972, and in 1974, I gave birth to my daughter, and who's my only child, my daughter Jahan, and you can see us there in times gone by. But while I was in hospital, because that's what you got to do then, Siddiqui was stolen from my home. I never was able to find her. I felt appropriately guilty. So the story that I would tell myself, and I still do because it feels less painful, is that someone saw this young American mother who really didn't know much at all about caring for a parrot, and they decided that they would give it a better home than I was giving it. And to live with that, and to know that, gosh, how far away from me was knowledge about what to do and how to care and how to find resources and how to provide for a bird. It was like that was a big gap, and that hunger for that information and that knowledge has stayed with me for so many years. And in 1977, on April 22nd, my daughter and I departed Kuwait hastily and came back to the United States. I will say that I've had a wonderful time going back to the Middle East several times since those years, and especially the time that I spent in Qatar and in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. But my time in Qatar was enhanced by visiting the aviaries where the Spix macaw was in residence and was being bred in captivity. I will never forget those experiences. So Kuwait, being so far away, again, for me, was how do you build bridges to your past, to your future, to all the other things that you don't know? And for me, the definition of that is curiosity, and curiosity about life, about things, about behavior, about the unknown, for me, has really always been a driving factor in my life. So
It's an incredible story thinking about just how far across the world you were. But it seems like no matter where you go, there's parrots, there's people that love parrots, and it's just an international kind of thing.
yes, it is. And everywhere I have been, I have found amazing people who love and revere and care for parrots. There are also people who take advantage of them and treat them horribly. You can't have one, I think, without the other, unfortunately. But to be able to move along and to figure these things out and to know that there is a community in every country. If you have something that you love and you're passionate about, you can find people who are related to that as well.
Welcome. Well, when you left Kuwait, then you returned to the US and you were living in Colorado, correct?
I came back to Colorado and I stayed here for a few years. And because I'd been home for such a long time. And when I was here, I decided my daughter was young. I decided I really missed having a parrot. Well, I lived up in the Roaring Fork Valley, and that area has the towns of Aspen and Carbondale and Glenwood Springs, Basalt, El Jebel, lots of small town towns along this road, Highway 82. And at that time, Walmart, and this is back in 78 or 79, was selling parrots. I don't know if some of you that are my age or around there remember that, but that is where I got my first two parrots when I came back to the United States. And they were wild caught. They were crammed into a cage. And I only learned this information afterward because I was so taken with the birds and what could I do to help that I didn't necessarily think to ask the appropriate questions. But in that particular group of birds, I ended up choosing a Poiceblus, a Myers parrot that I named Dante, and a little Bordigeris, a canary wing that I named Primo. And they stayed with me, and I had no clue how to interact with them because they weren't really comfortable and had never really been worked with by people. They were in the wild, and then they were in a cage in a big box store for sale. And it wasn't till really a number of years later that that Walmart actually stopped selling fish and birds, as well as the other exotic pets or mammals that we call pocket pets, like hamsters and gerbils. And they even continued though with fish for quite a while. And then I don't remember when fish were stopped being sold from Walmart.
I think
And
it was in the early 2000s, because when I
Mhm.
was researching all of this, we had found the article, it was 1994 when they stopped selling the other pocket pets. But I remember going to Walmart when they had fish, and that had to be like early 2000s. But yeah, it was really difficult to find that information though. When Julie and I were working on this presentation and trying to find this information, it was impossible to find any pictures of birds or any other animals at Walmart to see like what the enclosures looked like. And it was really difficult to even find the information that they sold animals there. So it was interesting to just like hear about their enclosures from you, just because I can't find any evidence of it online anywhere.
Yeah, it's like a dirty secret, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Absolutely doesn't go with their merchandising plan.
No, and when you look up like Walmart parrot or Walmart birds, like it'll be bird toys, bird seeds, stuffed animals, things like that. But there was almost zero information on Walmart selling live animals.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd be really interested if anyone has any photos of the enclosures that they used to have. I know that might be a long shot, but it would be interesting to see.
What I best recall is it's just they were really, really abysmal cages
Yeah, I can
with
imagine.
too many birds crammed into them. That's what I recall. So after that, I decided that I wanted to see what other birds I could have in my flock. And at that time, I had another career. When I moved back to the United States from Kuwait, as a single mom, no one wanted to hire me because they thought I'd be out sick or whatever, taking care of my young child, who was basically 3 years old when we moved back to the United States. And I started another business. It was a food related business. It was catering, and it was very successful. And I worked really, really hard at that business. And I was there at the right time and at the right place. And at one of my clients' homes, I saw this amazing small parrot that I had never seen anything like it. And this was in 19, late 1979, 1980. And the bird was brilliant yellow, orange, and green. And it was not particularly large, but bigger than a cockatiel. And for those of you that can guess, it was a sun conure. And when I went to this particular pet store, it was the only pet store in for ages. There was another one in Glenwood Springs, but the couple that owned it came from California, and they had a pet blue and gold that was there in the store. And she, the owner's wife, she wanted to know that if she taught me how to hand feed this clutch of young sun conures, would I do that? And then in exchange for that, she would sell me one of those young conures at a highly reduced price. And I remember that back in that time in 1978 or 79, that a sun conure was $650. So for a single mom with a kid, that was a lot of money. But I had just never, ever seen something so beautiful and so animated. And I agreed to take on the responsibility of hand feeding these birds. Would I do that now? No way. I wouldn't want to be responsible for something, should something terrible happen. But I was so excited and so thrilled. And I was a really good listener, and I really followed the instructions. And I had a blast with those 5 little parrots for about the 2.5 to 3 weeks that she was gone. I never knew birds would just readily jump in a water bowl to take a bath, what it was like to hand feed with a syringe, what it was like to spoon feed, what it was like to pick one up and to handle it, because Dante and Primo didn't care for me at all. They would take their food. They would allow me to clean the cage, but anything else, no way. And of course, with the information that we've learned so much more now about behavior and about positive reinforcement and all the ways that birds learn, as well as other humans, I didn't have any of those skill sets. So It was Salsa, it was Dante, Primo, and me, and my daughter, and my dogs. I had 2 dogs as well. And in 1988, I decided that it was time to make a change in my life. And I sold my home, and I packed up my daughter and my pets, and I moved out to California because I wanted to change from Colorado. And at the time, um, also had some horses because my daughter was a really talented equestrian. And I ended up renting for a couple of years a place in Laguna Beach. And I loved it. I loved the weather. I loved the greenery. I loved the trees. I loved the ethnic diversity. And I loved what was available to learn about parrots and related birds. And at that time, Bird Talk was really a popular magazine. And I remember seeing an ad for Omar's Exotic Birds in Laguna Hills, which was not that far from where I lived in Laguna Beach. And I remember going in there and being just amazed because there were hand-fed babies that were there, hand-fed baby birds that were there, and that people were coming in and handling them and hand feeding them. And it was something I'd never seen or experienced. And I became a dedicated volunteer there, which brought me a huge amount of knowledge. And at that time in our lives, in our history of bird keeping, that really was the heyday of aviculture for people learning. And the bird clubs and the opportunities for visits and learning were just abundant. People were excited, they loved them. And and really the sort of the California style of aviculture came into being. And I learned so much by mentors who had been living and caring for birds for 10, 20, and 30 years before it even became popular, but by watching and learning about such a variety of species, um, and seeing how different birds could be, seeing what birds needed. And I think at that time, Omar, and he was married to Fran at that particular time, did a really great job as best as they could, wanting to provide educational materials and resources to their clients and to their customers. And I was really excited about that because, again, it gave me an opportunity to continue learning, but it gave me an opportunity for exchange and dialogue and to find out what was working for people and what wasn't working for people. And the more that I learned, the more I wanted to learn. Um, what I recall, especially at that time, was answering the phone when someone would call and the questions are, my bird is, and they were always ready to complain. My bird is biting me. My bird is screaming. My bird acts like it doesn't feel good. And the resources for so much of that in 1988 were not just as widespread as they are right now. People didn't really talk about rescue and sanctuary because people assumed that birds, if they didn't want them, still had a pretty good intrinsic value so that they could sell that bird and get their money back. But also that if people had problems with birds and bird behavior, that, oh, it was pretty simple. You just give it to a breeder and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. But that just didn't make sense. That was such an unfair thing to to impart to this relationship of a parrot and a human, that just didn't sit well with me. And that is also, that time frame is when the burgeoning field of behavior and learning in regard to parrots and other animals was starting to gain a lot of attention, and it came from people like Chris Davis, who had trained the bird in the Beretta series. She trained Fred the cockatoo, and there were many Freds that played Fred. And she had worked at Lion Country Safari, and she was really amazing and kind and gentle in her ability to read and to communicate and understand life with animals. She wasn't a great teacher in that it was difficult for her to pass on her skill set about what to do, but she was dedicated, she was kind, and she was compassionate, and she really, really was a help. And then others came into fashion, and we saw them come and we've seen them go. But those were the early days with Sally Blanchard, with Phoebe Linden, with Liz Wilson. And those people had a lot of information and a lot of articles in Bird Talk and some of the other bird publications that were there. And they were also frequent presenters at many of the different educational conferences for aviculturists and lifetime aficionados of parrots. And that seemed to be the path toward people understanding and finding ways to interact and behave with their bird to create a much more sympathetic and compassionate way of living with those animals. But birds were still readily dispersed of and given to different breeders. Or in those days, which we really don't see in the United States anymore, are bird marts where lots of baby birds and other birds were brought in for trade or for sale. I know that Dr. Labondia remembered that really, really well from his early experiences with that here in Colorado as well. But there came to be sort of a conflict between aviculture as a study and people that had companion parrots. Aviculturists wanted to breed birds for the knowledge of what it took to breed birds, what it took to raise them, what it took to feed them. What did you do when you had a sick one? What about disease testing? What about disease? What about all of these different factors that are so much a part of our daily dialogue here at the Gabriel Foundation and with any of you who have companion parrots and veterinary care and what do you do? All of those things. And then people who just wanted a parrot as a pet to do what they wanted it to do. So there was kind of a rift that aviculture, in my opinion, in my observation, didn't really see the role that they had opening up before them about the good and the benefit that they could reap for the benefit of birds by sharing this knowledge. And the one avenue that did help this information cross over were the different kinds of conferences and symposiums. And that is when, out there in California, is when I learned about the American Federation of Aviculture. I learned about the Avicultural Society of America. I learned about the Association of Avian Veterinarians. I learned about different people like John Studley and some of the others that were pioneers in the field of aviculture. And that was really, really exciting. For me also in my life, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel worldwide and experience what it's like to be in different countries and different cultures where parrots are involved. And as I mentioned earlier, having parrots and my love for birds as a bridge between me and wherever else I'm traveling has really been a lifesaver for me. and that I got to learn, I got to share information, and the payback that I was able to apply to the birds that came into my care was profound. And I saw this quote about holding a rainbow many, many years ago. And I personally think that birds are a miracle. I think their flight, I think their colors, I think so much about them is absolutely spectacular and special, but that miracles are made real by the opportunity to feel the touch of nature. From touch comes knowledge. With knowledge comes inspiration to care. And I think that that maxim has been certainly important to me as founder of the Gabriel Foundation to help find what it is that triggers us all to inspire us and to make us want to do better on behalf of the birds that we all know and that we love. So for me, curiosity is one of the most important things that any one of us can bring to the table, because you never know what's in the end of the path. And had I not had these other experiences in my life, I would not be as rich in history and information and relationships as I've been fortunate enough to be.
Well, you had a lot of experience even before getting Gabriel. But that's kind of what I would like to talk about now is the actual inception of the Gabriel Foundation, who he was, and a little bit about his story.
Yeah, he was an amazing bird. He was not my first bird, so I remind everyone that my first bird was Siddiqui, which did mean friend in Arabic. And then when I came back to the States, then I had Dante and Primo, and then I added Salsa to my life, my son Conyer. And then while I was working for Omar, I added Babu, a Moluccan cockatoo female, and I added Pancho, my blue-fronted Amazon, who was one of the loves of my life. And it was one of his flight feathers that was the logo for my store, The Bird Brain. And I ended up acquiring my gray parrot Mookie from a bird mart, an event when Mookie was 4 months old. And Mookie is the last one of my original birds, and he's 40 now, who is still with me. When I was working at Omar's, I was really curious about life with a macaw. And I remember talking to Omar and saying, I'm really thinking about adding macaw to my life. What do you think about that? And Omar was not Arab. Omar was Cuban. His mother happened to really like Omar Sharif. And so when Omar was born, that's how he was named Omar. And he learned a lot about parrot keeping from his early years in the United States as well as Cuba, but also in California. And we had baby birds, baby macaws come into us, and we had some birds that boarded with us that were macaws. And I found myself finally interested in wondering what it was like. And he said, well, Julie, he said, I can see you with a green wing. I can see you with a harlequin. And if it's something you were interested in, I could probably see you with a hyacinth macaw. And I said, well, I would be very interested. Let me think about it. And we talked a lot about hyacinths, and Omar had a couple of pair of hyacinths that were producing offspring. And he said that if I were interested, that I should let him know, because he was taking names of people that were interested in some of his hyacinth offspring, and that basically each of us that were interested would get sort of a lottery ticket. It was really the short straw, long straw thing. And I put my name in on that. And Gabriel was hatched late in 1993. And the particular clutch that his parents had, there were 3 eggs in it. The first egg hatched, and that chick only lived a few days. The second egg never hatched, and neither of those had my name on it, but the third egg did have my name on it. I was the one with the straw on that egg, and that egg hatched, and that is what Gabriel was. And you'll see a picture of his egg later on through this. And I was overjoyed. I was nervous. I was excited. And I thought, boy, I'm on a steep learning curve here. And what do I need to know? And at that time, and I'm sure Dr. Labondia will remember this, but a lot of the breeders in California decided that hand feeding large birds, especially macaws, because the motility of the crop, because if they were juveniles, that oftentimes that those crops were slow to empty, and aviculturists were worried about bacteria or fungal buildup, that those birds were routinely dosed as youngsters, as chicks, with Baytril and nystatin. And as a result of that, what I learned later on, that probably and most likely created a super resistance to the antifungals and antibacterials in Gabriel. And prior to him ultimately coming into my life and into my home, he was in and out of the veterinarians a number of times for a chronic yeast infection. I didn't know how serious that was. It seemed that the veterinarian who was treating him was doing the right things, but I didn't necessarily know. And he grew up to be big and beautiful, as you can see. This picture of him on the stand. And he was an amazing, amazing, amazing bird. And when he was about 18 months old is when he developed a really strong fungal infection that was taking a huge toll. And the veterinarian that we used at that time, who was very popular in aviculture, was a gentleman named Hannes Stoddard. And Dr. Stoddard was in Southern California. He also is credited with inventing the Avid microchip. He basically informed me that Gabriel needed to be nebulized. He should be hospitalized and nebulized in order to control and to reduce and basically to heal from this chronic yeast infection. And he was with that veterinarian in that hospital for over a month. And he got, everyone thought, cleared up, and I talked about being able to bring him home. And then on October 25th of 1995 is when I got the call that morning they found him dead at the bottom of his cage. And I did ask for a necropsy, and the barium, the necropsy showed that he had a large blockage in his intestinal loop, and that was basically considered to be an intussusception of the small intestine, which really telescopes inside of itself, as part of a highly compromised immune system, um, in that particular case. And that is what killed him due to his high metabolism and the chronic fungal infection that he had. And that was a terrible, terrible day for me. And it was one of those life-changing events because this was a bird who I thought that I would have for years to come. I thought he'd be one of my flock for many, many years in the future. And that's not what happened. And he died. And I tried to come to terms with that. And I remember so much this young couple that sometimes had bird sat for me. And the woman's name was Olivia. And she was outgoing. She was Latina from Cuba, and her personality was huge. And I remember talking to her and her husband David, and I said, Olivia, I miss Gabriel so much. And I love my other birds, Mookie, Babu, Pancho, Salsa. They were all with me really, really long time. And Olivia said, Julie, don't feel sorry for yourself. She said, just because he's not here doesn't mean he isn't with you every day of your life. And he is going to be with you, and he will make sure that he helps you along the path because you love birds and you have a lot of work to do. And that is what was the impetus for the Gabriel Foundation. And it was really, really hard to um to move forward with that. But having that idea hatch based on so many of the conversations and the people that I'd come to meet at different events and shows and marts everywhere that I would travel really was pressing. And I decided that the Gabriel Foundation is something I wanted to do. And that's where it started. And so having all of you 30 years later share this time and this story is very emotional to me. And I feel so privileged that I can share this story with you, and that hopefully for each of you who has loved and lost a special bird, and I know there are many that have, that they are still with us. In our hearts means they are still with us. And we have a lot of work to do to continue to improve the lives of so many others who have not yet gone down that path.
I think that one of the really special things about TGF is that it has always been about bringing people together. Now we're all sitting here in a webinar, learning about all of these things, in like an online format. But even back in the day when TGF first started, I know that the symposiums were a really important part of what TGF did. So maybe you can share a little bit about what those look like, the purpose of some of the symposiums, and a little bit about what the early days of TGF kind of look like.
Yeah, the symposiums were wonderful. They started in 1999, and they were called Parrots in the New Millennium. And because we were approaching the year 2000, and I was full of anticipation of what 2000 could mean for that moving forward, what that could mean for our knowledge and increased awareness of aviculture. And I decided, as you so succinctly paraphrased it, that bringing to people together for the benefit of something that's a mutually shared passion for all of us, different ways, different reasons, different modalities, on and on and on. But it was something core to hundreds and hundreds of people, that focusing on what can we do and what can we do better? What can we do to make the lives of birds better that make us better people? And it was that cross borders of all kinds that really was the focus on that. And we had people from the conservation community. We had field biologists and researchers. We had retailers. We had breeders. We had pet owners. We had people from the beginning fields of behavior, and we had people who had spent a lot of time in the field working with birds and getting assessments on what's going there. And I think bringing those people together in a way that they could listen and learn from each other and hopefully hear each other. And I'm not naive enough to think that we're all going to agree, because that just doesn't happen, but to at least be tolerant and listen and have that opportunity to learn about different ways we can all succeed and do better at what we love. And those symposiums were absolutely amazing. And I think our first one, we had about 400, some of you that are on this call were there for the first ones. I think we had about 350 or 400 people, and the first one was held in Las Vegas at the Tropicana. The second one that we had, there was about that number as well, and people from all over the world came. We had presenters from Indonesia, we had presenters from Australia, we had presenters from Japan, we had presenters from the UK, we had presenters from Mexico and Canada, and everyone got to share something. I will say too, I believe that we were the very first organization to include invitations to Petco and to PetSmart to come in and talk about their preferred bird programs, because in those days, Petco and PetSmart were buying up all kinds of parrots, not just little green cheeks and the budgies and the cockatiels or whatever that you see now, but they were doing a huge trade in parrots of all sizes. And so there was a lot of emotion. Some of this stuff was pretty high volume in terms of being heard and listening, but people behaved, they listened, and they learned. And for 3 years, we made that impact happen. And it was really something that I think we contributed to the success of parrot welfare, but also about what we stood for as an organization, about what does welfare look like? What does education look like? And we have the best teachers in the entire world. We have parrots. They will tell us almost everything we know if we just learn and see and look about how to listen. And many of those early relationships with those people, and we're talking a long time now, have endured and have been wonderful and have repaid all of us in so many ways by this cross-cultural and international resource of education and caring. And it is about building bridges. We talk about the political news of the times that we're living in right now, and we see such change. And I think in the last 20 years, these changes that are now that we're dealing and facing with aviculture have been so profound that it's brought us to a very new place in our lives. So for us and for the Gabriel Foundation, for the people who gave their absolutely generously of their time to be on our board, to help with our educational programs, to help in so many ways, from behavior, diet, nutrition, veterinary care, all of those people I wish to thank so sincerely, because they brought us to where we are today. And pre-pandemic, when conferences were still going on, I was lucky to be considered and invited to present all around the world. And I've done that. And to find ways to learn and to share has been phenomenal. This is Mount Fuji with these three little kayaks. This was taken in Japan, and we were on a ferry, and one of the attendees at one of the events had her three little kayaks, and she had them on harnesses. Excuse me. And I just love this picture of them looking at Mount Fuji. When we started our early symposiums, there was, excuse me, there was some conflict between those people who worked with parrots and trained parrots versus aviculturists and breeders. But what we have seen over the past 30 years is that there has become a cohesiveness where these different entities overlap. And this particular picture of me on the right was at Natural Encounters, Steve Martin's facility in Lake Wales, Florida, and learning, excuse me, ways to behave so much more respectfully to our parrots. It was a wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity. Excuse me, I need a couple sips of water.
No problem. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like the symposiums, it was people coming to us and all gathering together, but then you have also done so much international travel for AAV conferences and even around the United States. TGF just has a big history of having a lot of these international partnerships. And I mean, we've touched on it again and again of just no matter where you go, people have birds, people love birds. And so it seems like you can just find that, I guess, passion anywhere you go. And so let's see. I skipped over one of the slides, but one of our favorite stories here at TGF is at the Playboy Bunny Mansion. Do you want to talk about these photos, Julie?
Yeah, I want to tell you, when I had my catering business, Aspen right now has a reputation that is, I'm not proud of Aspen's reputation. With the kind of people, a lot of the people that go there and the money and all that. And that for those of you who don't know, the very most expensive single residence property in the United States is in Aspen, Colorado, and it is on the market, in case any of you are looking, for $300 million. You can have this 19-acre home. And I think it's got 25 bedrooms and 30 bathrooms and on and on. And it was started by people from Fresno and that valley in there in California, the people who brought you Palm Wonderful and all the stuff with the pistachios, a couple there. But Aspen, in my catering career, I did have a lot of opportunity to work with celebrities and big corporate and all of those kinds of things. And every day learn something. And I happened to be watching Discovery, and Discovery Channel was doing a program on different celebrities and famous people who lived with animals. And they had a segment on Hugh Hefner and the Playboy Mansion. And growing up in Chicago, one of the high-rise buildings in Chicago was the Playboy building. And on top of the Playboy building, you know, was the bunny with the two ears, the silhouette. Anyway, seeing this on Discovery and going, I want to do something at the Playboy Mansion. I want to get parrots into the press and I want to get parrots out into the public. And that was probably the most challenging, difficult event I ever have done or attended in my life. It took a year of work, but we did it. And I will tell you, if you want bunnies to appear in bunny costumes, you have to pay extra. You have to be responsible for having their little bunny costumes clean. And if you want them in high heels, that's going to cost you even more. But the amazing thing about being there and going through all of the different steps that it took to have this thing happen, I had to meet with a lot of the people before Hugh Hefner got the pitch. And I was sitting with two of his lieutenants, I don't know what else you call them, and we went into the capuchin monkey enclosure. And I always carry snacks and treats for birds where I am because, you know, if it takes a little bit of a lure or a bribe to have someone come and talk to me, for an animal come and talk to me, I'm willing to do that. And I was sitting with these two gentlemen and the capuchins came over. Well, they seemed to think I was just fine, but they didn't like one of the guys there. And the monkeys started jumping on the guy. I didn't know whether to laugh, to scream, to call for help, to call for anything like that. And this guy says to me, "Get this monkey off my back, get this monkey off my back," which has only been a saying that I've ever heard. And I thought, how am I going to get a monkey off your back? I don't know anything about monkeys, but duh, I had treats in my pockets. And those monkeys, I think there were three of them right there that were being naughty. They saw me with these things in my hand. They came to another spot and they were giving me the lowdown. And they were watching me and like, well, when are you going to give us our treat? So what do? I take the treat and I extend my hand and I extend it to the monkey's face, like I would hand it to a parrot in its beak. If a monkey can give you a dirty look, that's what I had from that monkey when one of them took his little hand and snatched that treat from me, held it by his hand, and started eating it. I will never, ever, ever forget that experience. I guess that we passed with colors and flying colors. It was really wonderful, and we got to go ahead. And Diane Warren, who many of you have seen at the Emmys or at the Oscars, she's won a lot of awards for her music. She is also a parrot person. And she lives, I don't know if she still does, but she lived originally with three parrots for a very, very long time, a Senegal, an umbrella cockatoo, and a gray. Anyway, and she became our award recipient for that year. And it was a really, really amazing time. It was exhausting. It was something about you only ever want to do once in your life. But you know, if you think it and you can do it, and we did it, that was a milestone. And then our lives were busy and full and rich, and we had lots more work to do between the bird brain, between Perico Products, which was my wholesale business, and I also had a parrot food business, Green Feather Goodies, and another that was with dry, dehydrated and freeze-dried ingredients called Max Snacks. All of those are gone now because as the Gabriel Foundation grew and our reputation grew and our time grew and our flock grew, it was too hard to manage all of those different entities. So all of that energy that came from years of being in the public with those things went to make Gabriel Foundation part of what it is today.
And so there's obviously a lot of really rich history that goes into your own personal story, which then led to TGF. Some of those fun things like the Playboy Bunny Mansion. But looking at the Gabriel Foundation now, would you want to talk about our mission today, how it's evolved over time, and what our core principles are nowadays?
Yeah, thank you, Kira. Our core principles are these 5 programs. Adoption. Our birds, the majority of them have had good lives with people. Not all of them, but the majority of them have. And we would be selfish to believe that we can't help find an adopter, a bird, where that relationship can continue. Rescue is something that we take very, very seriously. And prior to the pandemic, our population of birds was around between 450 to 600 birds. Since the pandemic, we have cut way back on the number of birds in our care, and we average between 200 and 250 at any one time, really dependent on size. For us, rescue is without intervention, that parrot's life is absolutely, absolutely in danger. And because of the caliber of the team that the Gabriel Foundation has, we have been able to go into situations that are volatile, difficult, traumatic, and be able to go in and focus on the job at hand, whether it's a hoarder, whether it's a disaster, whether it's a roadside zoo. We've been able to go in and be certain, swift, and strong, keep the parrot's welfare as our main focus, and get the birds efficiently out of there into a place of safety where we can then continue to find ways to improve their lives. Sanctuary is a program that we provide for some of the birds that have come to us that really just don't have it for people anymore. Life hasn't been kind to them. They're much happier being with their own flock and enjoying their flock, or that an owner has decided that they do not want their bird to be placed, they do not want their bird to be adopted out, and that they are willing to provide support for their bird sanctuary care with us. Rehab is what that period of transition is like when a bird comes into us. It gets extraordinary veterinary care. It gets the best home that we can provide. It gets a flock. It gets fabulous diet and nutrition. It gets exercise. It gets outdoor time, and it gets a compassionate and empathetic crew of people to care for it. And conservation, which was one of the areas close to my heart when I first started the Gabriel Foundation, we put it somewhat on hold at times during this past 20 years, but we can't stay quiet anymore about it, because the more that we learn about parrots in the wild, the more we're going to be able to apply a plethora of information to how we provide and care for birds with us and in our care. So we evolved our mission statement, and this is with the input of board members and supporters, to provide safe sanctuary and care for parrots in need, to match extraordinary birds with caring adopters, and to inspire and encourage all to responsibly improve the lives of companion parrots. And for those of you that have studied behavior and we've talked about all these things, there are some labels in there, but I think that we have a common and working definition of what these things look like to people who come and visit us and see the work that we're doing. And not only do I, but our entire team takes this very seriously. And I want to take this moment to really thank TGF's team. We are so lucky to have employees that have been with us for 29 years, for 20 years, for 15 years, for 14 years, for 10 years, 7 years, 6 years, and I think the newest one is 3 or 4 years. That is a huge, huge commitment. And what they have learned and given back to these birds, again, that I say are our teachers every single day, pays us back unbelievably. We can't even begin to measure the amount of grace and resilience that these birds provide us.
Well, we've talked a lot about the history of aviculture, what's led up to TGF, history of TGF, what our main focuses are now. But in talking about all of that, one of the things that has come up in conversation so much is, of course, the future. And the big question that we kept coming back to while Julie and I were working on this presentation is, where does all of this collective knowledge go as the older avicultural organizations and aviculturists take a step back? Nowadays, we live in a time where there's just so much that's documented online. However, the internet is a relatively new thing in comparison to human history, I suppose. But what about all of the information from the last few centuries that hasn't been archived? And also a lot of this like oral information and things that you learn hands-on, like where does all of that information go? And Julie has an incredible collection of catalogs. Could we catalogs? Books, all sorts of fun things. And so one of the things that we worked on while we were making this presentation was going through all of these catalogs, and we have some scans of some of them now. They're really delicate, and so some of these things are over a century old, if not older than that. And so we had to scan them all really, really carefully. But it was just really interesting to see how much of the information has changed and how much of the information is the same or almost the same. So let's see, let's see, the Birdman's treatise on birds and aquaria. Let's see. I thought the title of this one was really interesting to me, of Pets for Pleasure and Profit, which is, I mean, the same as it is nowadays still. The scan in the middle I thought was really interesting because I think that's one of the things that people still love about birds is their ability to talk. We have so many adopters that come in and they are looking for a bird that can talk and mimic with them. So I thought that was really interesting because that was, I think, from this parrots or Pets for Pleasure and Profit book here. Let's see. Pretty Polly. I thought that this little excerpt from this book was really funny. I read that to the team when we were going through all of these. Let's see, feathered pets. Um, Aviaries, this book here, and some of the scans you can see are about bird setups, cages, aviaries. And going through this, of course, a lot of our enclosures nowadays are larger. They have more enrichment, things like that. But the overall design of these was pretty much the same. And you can see that let's see. Oh, here were some bird supplies, a lot of which are still pretty much the same as well. And then I thought this was really interesting to include, just because we still get cages that look like this donated today. And so it's really interesting to see how, again, like some of these look exactly the same as a cage you might be able to get at like a PetSmart. And of course nowadays we know that there's better enclosures, but we still get these kinds of stands and cages donated to us. Um, but yeah, any thoughts there, Julie? I just thought like going through all of these was just so interesting, just because I mean, where else would you find this information or be able to access some of these things if you didn't have a collection of all of these catalogs?
Yeah. And it tells you we're doing a little better, but we've got a long way to go. And
Mhm.
now when someone asks us, well, what size cage do I need for my bird? We standardly say no cage is too big. As long as the bar spacing, blah, 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 is appropriate. Birds were never designed to live in cages. Many of them endure, but they were never designed to live in cages. And one of the trickle downs that we see from that are so many different kinds of disease related complications as a result of inappropriate housing and care. But it sure lets us know that, things change in a blink, and what we may think is acceptable now, 5 years, 10 years down the road isn't going to be. And I think that that oftentimes we have people interested in acquiring a bird, and they don't want it to live in a cage. They want it to live on a stand. They want it to be in its own room. And I think that they think they're really talking um, and doing this genuinely and sincerely for the welfare of that bird. But they forget that each bird is a sentient being, and each bird is very social as a flock member. And how does that jive with keeping that parrot's life expanded and large? And there's a lot of work for all of us who have that information to share it.
I wish that there was a way that we could share the information in these catalogs just because it is so interesting to see how things have evolved. And I think it's always a good reminder that we're still evolving to this day. And I tell adopters, like, the information that I'm giving you now is probably going to be different in a decade or so. So take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, really, really interesting. And I definitely encourage anyone out there, if they have any of these old books or old catalogs, to read through it and just kind of note some of those major differences. Well, as far as TGF goes, what are some of the milestones that we've had that you're the proudest of, and things that you think have just really moved the needle in terms of our birds' welfare?
One of the one of the one of the joys and the milestones um, for me, and I think for all of us affiliated with the Gabriel Foundation, has been the 20-plus-year history that we built and had with the Association of Avian Veterinarians. Every year, board members and some staff and I would be at the Association of Avian Veterinarian annual conferences, plus other conferences from the North American Vets Conference, the Way Out West Conference, um, the um, uh, the big ones in Orlando. And to have that where the information that we shared to veterinary technicians, to vets, To all those other persons attending about our experience and work and handling with parrots was really profound. That is huge, and I'm very grateful to the AAV for that relationship. 20 years plus is a long time. We have been able to work with organizations around the world. And some of our dearest friends are from Tsubasa in Japan, and that's TSUBASA, which means on wing. And Matsumoto and his group have single-handedly started the only parrot welfare organization in all of Asia. And they are in Japan. And we met many years ago in Tenerife in the Canary Islands at one of the Laurel Park conferences. And in 1999 is when we spent time at each other's facilities in Japan, and they're coming here, and it's continued for all those years ever since. That's huge. I think that also for me, another milestone is that because of our interest and concern and dedication to helping keep what's rare in the wild, working to figure out and support conservation of wild birds, that we have many different biologists and entities that want to come and talk about it and have a relationship with us. And we hope to continue much more of that in these next years that are coming with educational webinars, and to bring that to you, because not everybody is able to travel. And we would like to be able to bring that to you so that we all have a say and a hand in keeping parrots there in the wild. It's really an honor to be able to do that, and it provides a vast learning opportunity as well. I think that throughout the years, and I've said this earlier, but we've had many, many long-term relationships with birds. And I wrote a little piece that was on Facebook a couple weeks ago, that one of our very, very first intake birds, his name was Rambo, a blue and golden macaw, came to us from our very first large intake. And he'd been with us for 30 years, and he died. And it really was a huge, impactful moment for me, because he lived every day with things that we didn't do great, maybe the things that we knew we could do better and didn't. Um, but he was there, he was resilient, he taught us so much about consistency and his behavior and choice and respect, that losing him was really like losing one of the redwoods. When somebody has been there, one of the grand old gentlemen of the Gabriel Foundation, he will hold a special life, a special spot in so many birds' lives. His companion buddy, Echo, for those of you who want to know, is doing just fine. And we're really glad for that. But I think that's because Rambo and Echo were part of a larger flock, so they have another group to be able to move that alliance with. So I think that seeing our adoption programs grow, seeing people come back to adopt more than one bird or two birds or three birds over the years, to have a board of directors that has worked so hard and given us so much for 30 years is profound. And they have been there in the trenches through the good times, through the bad times, and are still willing to work with us and to move forward. We're changing our board a little bit this year. We've added a few more different age ranges. I'm really excited about that, because we want to be here for the next 30 years. And I may not be here physically to do that, but I'll still be around. And I want to make sure that the wisdom from all of our team, from me, the learning, that everything that our birds have taught us, carry that forward. So those are important milestones for me that have really helped shape the Gabriel Foundation. And I think also the kindness and the kindness and the generosity that so many people who know us, who heard of us, have shared with us over these 30 years. That's tremendous. And we are indebted and grateful to that as well.
So, I think it would be interesting to talk about some of your key takeaways. As far as parrots themselves, I think everyone knows they can be amazing, challenging, sometimes difficult and misunderstood companions to live with. But what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about living with companion parrots?
I think there are all kinds of misconceptions, and most people really look at it is can the bird do for them rather than what can they do for the bird. And I think those people, if they talk to anyone, especially anyone listening to this webinar today, know that there are things that they can do to help educate someone new to parrots. But that I think it's a disservice to our birds to look at them only as a captive animal when we need to see what they look like in the wild and what's going to be, because maybe one day there aren't going to be those parrots in the wild. One day there may not be parrots kept in captivity. And I'm not going to take a political stance here, but there is a lot of discussion out there on no more cages, no more birds in cages. And there are many, many places, cities and towns that are outlawing the keeping or the selling or the breeding of parrots in those areas. And that there are other people that say that, you know what, people can't provide adequately and well for their birds. The birds are paying the price, so nobody should be able to own them and care for them. It's really highly charged. The issue is, do you adopt a bird, where you go to a shelter or a place like the Gabriel Foundation that has birds available for adoption? And if you do that, are you getting a pet that has so much baggage? Well, I think we create our own baggage for every bird as we just learn to live with it. Or do you go to a breeder? And there are many, many people that want to get parrot breeders shut down. We're losing so many of them as we go ahead. And there's still some large ones out there, but they really are exporting a huge number to countries, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia, some of those areas. And I think we have to really determine and listen to see, is there a parrot crisis? And if we're looking at and agree that there is a parrot crisis, what does that look like? And what does that crisis mean for all of us? One of the things that the Gabriel Foundation does is we work very hard to get grants, and getting grants for parrots and parrot care is much more difficult now, especially post-pandemic, than it ever was before. But I think one of the really big problems, it's not politically correct to like to keep animals in cages. And I think that a number of people absolutely are upset and distressed and do not like the idea of keeping an animal in a cage. Our job, again, is education, to say, what can a cage look like? What can a cage be? What kind of refuge? What kind of safety? What kind of enrichment? What kind of space? What kind of activity can a bird have in that cage? And take it instead of as this limiting factor to keep a bird, but what can we do to that environment to make it bigger and better and more wonderful for our bird? So we're adding more activity and choice to that bird and their life. Wild at heart, parrots in their natural habitat. If I could encourage every single adopter and make it mandatory for them to have a homework assignment, that would be to watch videos of parrots behaving in the wild as wild parrots, and to see what some of those behaviors are like exactly in your own birds. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like the light bulb goes off. Aging hands, lifelong wings. When we talk about care for a parrot, it's a lifetime of responsibility. It's not just the lifetime of the person, it's the lifetime of that bird. And when someone is no longer able to provide for their bird, whether through disability or death, please, please, please make plans, set something aside so that your parrot is provided for. Because just because you love them doesn't mean your kids are, or your neighbor is, or somebody else is going to do that. And defining welfare. With the USDA coming into the Animal Welfare Act now for parrots, I think we have much better information in front of us to be able to read what welfare reads like and what it looks like. Colorado is one state that has a regulatory agency called PACFA, which is the Pet Animal Care Facilities Act. That combined with the USDA for many avian related entities, Gabriel Foundation of which is one, are reshaping what welfare looks like. There's accountability, there's documentation, and there's data. In that, with the cost of compassion, it's wonderful to care and to love a bird. It is very discouraging to any of us here at the foundation when we've adopted a bird out and let's say something happens 10 years down the line, the person returns the bird to us, which we will always take one of our birds back, always. And we inquire, when was the last veterinary visit for that bird? Nothing. We hasn't had one since they adopted it. And how do we change that? The cost of veterinary medicine has increased exponentially, but so have the diagnostic tools and the way that we have the information. And that cost of compassion is the cost of care. And truly, 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 our educational focus for someone is that adoption fee or the fee that the price you're going to pay a breeder or a pet store is only the beginning. And what you need to plan for and look for and make an exception for of what is the cost of caring for that life that is absolutely 100% dependent on you for their welfare and their well-being. These are big concerns. And I think that no matter what spectrum that we're on, these are things that apply to us all because it's going to happen to us eventually.
And from more of an organizational standpoint, what do you think is the most difficult thing about this line of work?
Compassion fatigue is a big one, but also finding funds. And I think it's unrealistic to expect that people who love parrots are going to be the people who support organizations like the Gabriel Foundation. That's too small of a community. There needs to be a community of people who are interested in animal welfare. There needs to be a community of people that are interested in conservation, that are interested in behavior, that are interested in species continuing, that care about animal welfare. And for those that are underserved, and I would say that the majority of people that adopt parrots, and I'm sad to say this, don't provide their birds the kind of veterinary care that they need. We're finally to a spot, thanks to AAV and the educational programs that they've put out there, that there are far more veterinarians with a special interest in avian medicine than ever before. but we're losing a lot of the ones that have been there forever. They're ready to retire. They're ready to enjoy that good life. And we've seen that with our own veterinarians and wish them the absolute very best and thank them for everything that they've done for us. It's huge. So resources fall, but needs don't. And the needs are that as the population that keeps parrots continues to age, those birds may age out of being cared for by their caregivers. And where do they go? Is that indeed a parrot crisis? Or is it just a way of shifting our viewpoint of what do those birds deserve and what have they earned in their lifetime? We are so fortunate to have some adopters and quite a few. They don't want baby birds anymore. They don't want young birds, most of them. They want middle-aged and some want senior birds because they want to make sure that those last years of that bird's life are the absolute very best that we can give them and that they can have. And I think that that's something when someone comes to us with the loss of a bird and they're brokenhearted about losing their bird, my philosophy is this, that our birds are genuinely not selfish. When one of our birds moves over and it passes, it is opening up an opportunity for another bird to be loved and to be cared for and to be provided for. And I think as a community of those who love birds, to realize that our care and what compassionate care looks like is only as limited as our perspective. And we look at all of these different birds that have been here and you see the differences from then, from now, and we think they can fledge, they can flourish. And we can provide an environment where their resilience is served and we continue to learn from them every single day. And I think the day we lose hope, and I think that that goes to compassion fatigue and to a team that's dedicated to caring for birds, when we lose hope because maybe we lose one or we don't see a change or we don't see that there's enough of a difference, then we need to stop and regroup and find another way to look at it so we can continue to offer what a bird, in our at least educated opinion, needs to thrive.
And this slide, and the next slides as well, were from our question, what has brought you the most joy? And I think that we all love to see these transformations of our birds, and seeing how compassionate care can go such a long way in transforming their lives. And the other thing that you told me was seeing our next generation pick up the gauntlet.
Yes.
And you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, and I love it. I love it when we have young people. Last week, we were with a huge group, almost 100 guests, of volunteer group. It's a national volunteer group, and it's comprised of mothers and daughters. And they were there, and these kids ranged from 7th grade to 12th grade. These kids were smiling. They weren't sitting on their mobile device texting. They were interacting with the birds. They were asking questions. They were making enrichment. They were raising their hands. They were smiling, and they were smiling. And that takeaway, watching these kids open up their eyes and encounter something new and transformational for them that they will never forget, to me is the very best gift in the world that we could ask for. That moment in time, we've profoundly changed that person's life.
And I know there have been a number of people that have been really important in your life as well. And so the final thing that has brought you the most joy is all of those special people. I have some pictures here.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of wonderful, wonderful people. And I could go on, and I imagine if I saw the list of everyone here, I would probably say I pretty much know every single person on there. So I want to thank you all, because we're all got smiles on our faces. All of us can't ask for better than that. Give us something to create joy. And one of my slides, I wanted to thank my mom, Betty, and many of you knew her and had a chance to meet my mom. And people that didn't know her and that they would first meet her, they said, "Oh, she was so sweet." Well, that's not a word I would ever use for my mom, but maybe that's because I knew her such a long time. But she really inspired me to act with compassion and empathy, to stand up for integrity and to trust and respect, and to never stop learning. And for me, as I age, that three things that I wish to share with every single person who comes into my life and asks me about what's important to me and what advice would I give them? I will say to be curious, always to be curious. There's not a day, an hour that can't go by without us learn something. To be kind, because kindness is a gift that pays back. So it really is self-serving in many, many ways, because giving kindness begets kindness. And the last maxim is to celebrate joy. Every day, find something that brings you joy, that you love, that enriches you, and that gives you a smile and makes you feel that this is great. I'm in the right place at the right time, and I'm sharing this positive energy and this growth with anyone who's willing and eager to learn. So those are sort of my three principles to live by. And when you lose a bird, when I lose a bird, I think that A.A. Milne, although he talked as Winnie the Pooh, some of his quotes are so beautiful. If ever there's a tomorrow when we're not together, keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever. And Gabriel's been there for 30 years. And his memory hasn't faded. He's still that beautiful, young, 22-month-old hyacinth macaw that you see right there. And I think about Olivia saying to me, "Julie, don't be ridiculous. Gabriel is with you every moment of the day. Look at all the birds that have found the Gabriel Foundation. Look at all the people that have found the Gabriel Foundation. You keep going, girl, and that's what you're going to do." And I made that promise to Gabriel, and that's what I'm doing. I plan to be around a long time. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, and this watercolor illustration is by the artist Molly Lee Kiuchi, and she did for us upon the passing of Pancho, who was one of our beautiful scarlet macaws. And he's there talking to the little prince. And as you can see, it's many forgotten this truth, but you must not forget it. You remain responsible forever for what you have tamed. And that responsibility doesn't dissipate when you decide you don't want your bird anymore. That responsibility is, how can I go on and do the responsible thing? But we need to remember that we made the choice to bring these birds into our lives collectively as humans, but also individually if they become a part of our life. And how do we honor and respect and give back for that? And they provide us with resilience, sentience, and survival. Three enormous gifts.
Well,
Yep, and that's part of my
that was
family.
it. Was this at your
This was in Las
mother's?
Vegas, yep, and I'm standing behind my daughter. She's in the blue shirt, and I'm right, yep, there, yeah.
And then this is
Remembering all those
John.
names.
Awesome. Well, it was so fun sitting down and talking about the history of TGF. I think it's really fun to share with people just because obviously like your team has heard many of these stories and we get to hear firsthand from you. But not everybody knows about the rich history of like your family and the hotels and having birds there and even a little budgie landing on you. Those are all stories that we get to hear from you in person. So we really hope that everybody enjoyed just learning some new things today. And let's see, we had a couple of questions in here. Let's see. First of all, we had some people that just wanted to say hi. Joe Thompson, she
Oh,
said,
Joe,
yeah,
yes.
hi, and sending warm greetings.
Thank you,
Um,
Joe.
we
Joe
had
is phenomenal with gray parrots. You'll see lots of information on the Gray Parrot Project in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's thanks to Joe and to John and Therese. So look forward to that this coming year.
And then let's see, we had Margaret Ray
Oh, Marg,
from
hi.
Ontario that was saying hi as well. Let's see, Bruce here was asking, when you were in Aspen, did John Denver ever show any interest in parrots?
He was one of my best clients in my catering business.
Really?
Yes. And he knew I had parrots. But John Denver was one of the nicest, most generous, kind guys ever.
That's awesome.
And he was a client of mine for 15 years. He was a great guy.
Oh, and then another question that we had from Margaret, she asked, when your parents are adopted, do they legally remain the property of TGF so that they are returned if and when the adopters can no longer care for the birds?
Yes, we have that clause in our adoption agreement, and we explained to the person that's why. And some of our birds end up far away from us, and we make sure they get back to us, and we've done that. We have volunteers that help. They'll fly out and transport a bird. Our most recent one um, uh, came from back east, and our volunteer Kathy went and did that. It was awesome. But yeah, we do have that. And of course, um, that that caveat is only as good as you can enforce it. Have we tried legally to get a bird back from someone? We have a couple of times. And some were wins and a couple others were not. But we hope that at least that our relationship with that adopter starts out on the same level, that we all want what's best for the bird.
And I think we've also done a good job about fostering strong relationships with other rescues and other
Mhm.
welfare organizations, because even sometimes we'll have birds that are relinquished to a different rescue, and then those rescues then reach out to us so that the bird does come back into our care.
And
Um,
for everybody that's listening, we do microchip all of our birds that are size appropriate. And so really green cheek conure. Um, I think, I don't know if we're doing cockatiels right now, but with that little mini chip that's out there, it's a lot easier for us to make sure that everybody's microchipped.
All right. Well, those were the only two questions that we had. I'll give just a minute here in case anyone had any last minute questions. But you're also welcome to email those to us. Let's see. Of course, I don't have our email posted anywhere on here. But you're welcome to email or maybe do like a contact form on our website. So if anyone had any additional questions, we'd be happy to answer those. And again, if anyone had to step out or if anyone's not here live and are waiting for the recording, that'll be up in just a couple of days on our website and on YouTube. But yay, we're all so happy that you were able to join us
Very
for
much.
our 30-year anniversary. Hopefully this was a really fun way to celebrate that for everyone. And yeah, we just greatly appreciate you being supporters of everything that we do here. Let's see. We had one question from Debbie. Let's see. They got life insurance for their bird so that they can come over to TGF when he passes. Let's see. Wonderful. Yeah, that's always something really good to have. Just policies and a will for your bird, estate planning so that they have a plan for when we're no longer here for them. Wonderful. Well, do you have any final things you'd want to share, Julie, before we end here?
I just want to say a huge thanks to people who've been there for me for this last 30 years and those that have shared their wisdom with me before that and have helped me grow into the person that I am right now. And that for any of us that are getting older, that I take great comfort in knowing that people I've met along this bird journey have meant the world to me, and I'm so appreciative to it. And I love sharing my stories. It's really fun and to see where life leads you. I can remember um, sitting at a little cafe in Laguna Beach, talking with a longtime friend who has been on our board for 25 years. And we were talking about what did we want to do when we grew up. And I said, you know, I really, really want to do something with parrots. I love parrots. Parrots mean the world to me. And she was talking about her field, which is in behavioral health care. And what do you know? Here we are, each doing something that that conversation 31 or 32 years ago was just starting out. So thanks to everybody for your time, for your ears, and for your well wishes.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope you have a good rest of your day. All right. Bye.
Bye.